So where is she?
She's over there. There she is.
May 23rd, 1979.
Can I get your name for the record?
James Miller.
And 38-year-old James William Miller is in an interrogation room at the South Australia Police Headquarters.
Miller.
And James, your date of birth?
February 2nd, 1940.
The dramatisation you're about to see is based on information gathered by police in numerous interviews.
Any questions or answers that you give can be recorded and used in court as evidence. You agree with that?
Yeah.
It's Miller's version of a series of murders committed 2.5 years earlier, when he and his partner, Christopher Worrell, went on a terrible killing spree.
I had nothing to do with the murders.
Did you?
OK, I got in the car and drove, but I didn't do anything like that.
It all began in late December 1976. An 18-year-old Veronica Knight is doing some last-minute shopping before travelling to Melbourne for the holiday break. She's the product of a tough childhood and she's looking forward to getting away from all of the turmoil and starting a new life.
Her father was alcoholic. Her mother died shortly after her birth. She was taken from the father because of his deep alcoholism. She was put into various foster homes and Salvation Army homes. And she was what was classified as environmentally retarded. She was not a simpleton or anything like that. She was just held back in her education because of her lifestyle and the way she was brought up.
So tell us about the first girl that you picked up.
Well, we were just driving around and Chris got out for a bit of a walk and...
So you're going to get a lift with us, yeah?
I suppose if you're going that way.
Yeah, of course.
And I just kept driving around the block and that and, when I got back, we were together and so they both just hopped in and we went for a drive.
All right, come on.
And where did you drive to?
We drove up to Windy Point.
After arriving at Windy Point Lookout, they then decide to get out of the city.
Yeah, just keep going, Dad.
Yeah, okay.
The car speeds through the night, further away from Adelaide. At the wheel, James Miller's heart is racing as he concentrates intently on the dark road ahead. In the back seat, Christopher Worrell is making crude advances to Veronica Knight.
Come on, I bet you like it. Just relax.
I'd like to get out now.
Take it easy.
It's now obvious that there's something sinister about the man sitting beside her. Several kilometres outside the township of Truro, the vehicle veers sharply off the highway into Swamp Road and deeper into the countryside. There's nowhere to run, nowhere to hide.
Yeah, just make a right here.
Do it, Chris?
Yeah, take your time, Jim.
Where's he going? Is he coming back?
Yeah.
What are you doing? Get off me! No! Please! Don't say anything! Ah!
Worrell's mood then takes a dramatic turn and he attacks without warning.
Get back.
Veronica struggles valiantly, but Worrell pins her down, tying her up with rope.
No one's gonna hear.
Her screams are in vain. She can no longer ward off her assailant. She is raped before being throttled to death on the back seat of the car.
How long were you away for?
Oh, came back after about 20 minutes and she was on the back seat.
Was she dead?
Yeah. I got real angry with him and shouted at him and then he pulls his knife on me.
Just keep your mouth shut, you bloody poof. Do what I say. And everything will be all right.
He says if I don't help him, he was going to do me in as well. So we put the body out near some trees and we threw some branches and twigs and shit on it.
Then, according to Miller, the two simply drive away, leaving Veronica's body in the silent darkness and no witnesses to their gruesome crime.
She was reported missing within the next 24 hours. Everyone thought, maybe she tried to hitchhike to Melbourne. They made these assumptions and the reported missing person file just in the end got shelved. Everyone gave up looking for Veronica.
So he didn't always get rough with them?
At police headquarters, detectives continue to interrogate James Miller.
I just thought this was a bit of an accident, you know.
His story of Veronica Knight's murder is just the start of a long and sickening saga.
Do you remember Tanya?
Yeah.
James Miller insists that he's not directly responsible for any of the events you are about to see. But police believe he's lying to protect himself and that he's played a much greater role than he's ever willing to admit. The known facts are undeniable, but the whole truth may never be revealed.
February 2nd, 1940.
James William Miller is being questioned by detectives about a series of gruesome murders involving girls who vanished from the streets of Adelaide.
After about 20 minutes.
Please, doesn't have to. Until you don't have to do this.
Miller has told police the shocking details of 18-year-old Veronica Knight's murder several years earlier.
Hey.
Oh, behind that tree there, yeah?
Oh, yeah.
10 days after that murder, Worrell and Miller are cruising Adelaide, watching for girls waiting alone at train stations and bus stops.
Hey, check that one out there, mate. Put your smile out.
Teenager Tanya Kenny is in town and is about to fall victim to the seemingly irresistible charms of Chris Worrell.
Tanya came from a very good home. She went down to stay with friends down south of Adelaide just after Christmas, and she came back to Adelaide on the 2nd of January, which was the day I think New Year's Day was held.
I dropped him off at Rundle Mall and went for a bit of a drive and I met him at the other end of the mall and he was there with his girl.
And she just got into the car?
Yeah, she just hopped in and we went for a drive to my sister's old joint. So what are you doing?
Just caught a ride up here from a place near Victor Harbour.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Have you been there?
Yeah, all the time. Get out there.
Tanya is driven to an unoccupied house in the suburb of Woodville.
What are you doing up there?
Oh, this has just got an old joint up there.
Yeah, we won't be too long. We'll just pick up the clothes and leave, yeah?
Miller stays in the car as Worrell takes the teenager inside, where, without warning, he attacks her.
He tells us that he heard a bit of a scream, stifled scream, and after a while he went inside and found that Chris had apparently strangled Tanya. He said that she had a rather sharp-looking line around her neck,
She was on the floor.
which indicated maybe he'd used a guitar string or something similar.
It's still daylight, and so the killers lock the house and drive to Wingfield, a northern suburb of Adelaide, where they dig a grave in an old rifle range. They return after dark and bury Tanya's body. When Tanya fails to return home that night, her parents believe she might have stayed overnight with a friend. The next day, they begin to worry and contact police. 2 girls have now disappeared from the streets of Adelaide in a little more than a week, but police have no reason to suspect a connection. For the next 3 weeks, Miller and Worrell will continue to prowl the streets, luring further victims into their car. In the late 70s, Adelaide is still considered by its citizens to be a safe city. 16-year-old Julie Makita is the product of a loving family. Her parents are teachers who are well versed in the theatre.
But we did trust all our children in terms of their friendships. We felt that the values that they got from us would keep them safe.
When Julie Makita finishes work, she calls her parents to tell them she'll be late getting home. At about 9 p.m, she's waiting for a bus outside a hotel in King William Street. Suddenly, she's approached by a young man who engages her in conversation.
Well, you're going in that direction.
Yeah. Give you a lift. Yeah, you can hop in next to him or something, whatever you like.
He brought her over to the car and she said her name was Julie, I think.
We're going down that way. Saves you trouble. Yeah?
Guess so.
Well, anyway, she hopped in the car and Chris said we were just going to give her a lift.
Miller drives to a secluded spot off the Port Wakefield Road.
I pulled the car over and went for a walk. Well, it was a long drive up there, so when I pulled the car over, I got out and I went for a walk.
Please.
Worrell forces Julie into the back seat and ties her hands, but she doesn't give way without a struggle. Somehow, she escapes from the car and momentarily flees into the paddock. Miller claims he returned and tried to drag Worrell away from Julie Makita.
Chris, no, get away, Rock, you.
As Miller watches on, Christopher Worrell holds the terrified girl down and strangles her.
Well, we put her body back in the car and drove up past Truro and to that spot that I showed you. And when we just put her on the ground and covered her with branches.
So the afternoon of that day was the last time we saw her alive, because when I got up the next morning, I found that she wasn't home. I was angry. I was angry because she hadn't rung. I was angry because it was very much unlike her to do that sort of thing.
By midday, when there's no contact with his daughter, Mick Makita begins calling Julie's friends and Adelaide hospitals, but all of his frantic queries result in dead ends. He then turns to the police for help.
I got the usual story of I had $1 for every worrying parent whose child hasn't come home for a while. I'd be a rich man and all that sort of thing. So they didn't really take us seriously, but I think by the third day we knew that something was very, very seriously wrong.
Chris was getting crazier. He was getting out of control.
As detectives continue to interrogate Miller, cracks emerge in his version of events.
He would have killed me as well if I tried to stop him or if I told anyone.
You bloody fool! Do you want to ruin everything?
Miller's account of his actual involvement in the killing of the girls and how 2 of the first 3 victims came to be dumped out at Truro just doesn't add up.
It's just isolated, it's remote, and it's a perfect killing field. And Miller was the one who had knowledge of that area.
By the end of January 1977, the fate of Veronica Knight, Tanya Kenny and Julie Makita remains unknown. They're listed as missing persons, but there is no evidence to suggest foul play. Worrell and Miller have not come under notice, and they continue cruising the streets looking for young women. It's the 6th of February, and near Adelaide Railway Station, Christopher Worrell approaches 16-year-old Sylvia Pitman.
Hey, how are you? You waiting for the train?
Yep.
Yeah. It's another 30 minutes. Do you want us to give you a lift? My dad's right there in that car.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Like the other victims, she doesn't stand a chance.
What's your name, by the way?
Sylvia?
Chris. So do you live
Chris,
down here?
well, he came back with her.
Yeah, about 20 minutes.
She jumped in and we drove up to Wingfield. Chris told me to get out of the car, so for a while, so I left the mare and went for a walk. I'll leave you two guys to a day, Chris.
Where are you going?
Come on, it'll be fun.
What? Don't! Get off me! Don't! Don't! Leave me alone!
Suddenly, Worrell snaps, unable to control his violent tendencies, and launches himself at the terrified girl.
Don't! Off me!
He overpowers her and she's raped before being strangled on the back seat of the car.
How long did you go for a walk for?
Oh, it's gone about 20, maybe 30 minutes. When I got back, she was dead.
And then you drove the body to Truro?
Yeah. Or Chris made me drive to Truro. You know, we got rid of the body, pretty much right near where we dumped that first girl.
Like the others, Sylvia's family reports her missing.
You obviously try and find out as much as you can and empathise with the family. Sometimes I think you take on board some of the pain the family's feeling.
Stop it!
They'd gone to huge extent to find their daughter that was missing. You could feel their pain.
4 young women have now been murdered in the space of just 6 weeks, and the alarm still hasn't sounded. Police, the public and the families of the missing girls have no idea that 2 killers are loose in the city. Within 24 hours of Sylvia Pitman's murder, with no one to stop them, Miller and Worrell ramp up their killing frenzy. The tiny hamlet of Truro is about 1 hour northeast of Adelaide on the Sturt Highway, which links South Australia with northwest Victoria and New South Wales. In early 1977, the barren fields near Truro become a mass burial ground for victims of a pair of serial killers preying on vulnerable women. After its terrible secrets are finally unearthed, the name of Truro will be notorious, forever associated with one of the worst mass murders in the annals of Australian crime. The killers, 23-year-old Christopher Worrell and 38-year-old James Miller, are well known to South Australian police. Worrell has spent time in prison for armed robbery and rape. Miller's record of petty crime stretches back to his teenage years, when he was in and out of institutions and reformatories. Miller was christened Melvin Raymond Juss. He changed his name to James Miller, which, coincidentally, is the same as the founding father of Truro. Over the next 20 years, he's in prison more than he's out. Miller and Worrell are an odd couple who first meet while serving time in Adelaide jail.
I think it's undeniable that Chris had a hold over Miller as a lover.
Bloody fool! Do you want to ruin everything?
Just keep your mouth shut, you bloody...
Chris has been known as the slut of Yatala. So no matter how much Miller denied about his sexual relationship with Chris, it is obvious that it was a strong sexual relationship. In that sense, you could say that Worrell may have had some sort of a hold over Miller. They lived in various locations, always together, shared the same accommodation, sometimes slept in the car together. They shared their work life together, they shared their personal life, and it seemed that they were almost inseparable.
Criminologist Alan Perry will later conduct an independent assessment of both men.
She got in.
Everything about Miller's background suggests a passive, inadequate, mildly sociopathic personality. Someone who found it difficult to form relationships with others. Worrell, on the other hand, had a much briefer antecedent history because he was much younger than Miller. But his history reflects a very violent, unstable personality. Worrell had the capacity to love anyone, whereas Miller, in his own sort of perverted and distorted way, I think actually thought he was in love with Worrell.
Within 24 hours of 16-year-old Sylvia Pitman's murder on the evening of February the 7th, Worrell instructs Miller to meet him outside the Adelaide post office. When he arrives, Worrell is with 26-year-old Vicky Howell.
I thought Chris liked this one. He liked her a lot more than the other ones.
Her background is checkered. She had been through an unhappy marriage. She was in a relationship which was not exactly the best at the time. She was going through a disturbing period of her life.
Where did you pick up Vicky?
Well, I got a phone call from Chris and he said, come pick him up at about 7 o'clock at the post office. So when I got there, Vicky was there and they seemed to be getting on pretty well. You know, she was a nice girl.
Half an hour's drive out of Adelaide along the Barossa Valley Highway, a few kilometres past Nuriupta, Worrell instructs Miller to pull over.
So I pulled over and went off to take a piss. And they were getting on pretty good in the back seat, so I left them to it.
Wait.
Left alone with Vicky Howell, Christopher Worrell turns on the girl in a sudden explosion of violence. She fights desperately for her life. He tears off her pantyhose and wraps them tightly around her neck.
Get off me, bastard!
Then, as he tightens his grip, he moves in closer, staring intently into his victim's eyes as she begins to choke. It's the last thing Vicky Howell will ever see as blackness closes in.
And when you got back, she was dead.
Well, when I got back, he was coming with a blanket. You know, he told me to get in the car and drive. So, I drove up to Truro and get rid of the body.
By now, Christopher Worrell is completely out of control, having committed 2 murders within 24 hours. James Miller cannot or will not do anything to stop Worrell, and the Truro body count continues to escalate.
The gap between them gets less and less, suggesting that the satisfaction that he was getting from these killings was lasting for a shorter and shorter period of time.
While family members and friends search in vain for the missing girls, police remain unaware of the gravity of the crime. 2 days after Vicky Howell is killed, 16-year-old Connie Ioannidis, known to her friends as Connie Jordan, is picked up in the middle of the city. The story Miller tells police almost defies belief.
We were driving around and we got pulled over by the cops.
What for?
You know, a defect notice or something. Well, anyway, there was this bird walking past and, you know, Chris couldn't keep his eyes off her. So after the cops are pissed off, he gets me to do this U-turn. He starts chatting her up. Before I knew it, she was in a car. We'll just go for a bit of a drive of the road, eh?
Yeah, we'll give it a run.
I left him in the car with her. Mate, he was just this completely different person. I couldn't do anything. He would have killed me if I'd done anything.
No, please. No.
Inside the car, the terrified girl is fighting for her life. But the teenager is no match for Chris Worrell. Just like the others before her, Connie Jordan is raped, then strangled.
Please don't.
Connie Jordan is the 5th victim to be buried outside Truro. There have now been 6 murders in as many weeks. Each of the victims has been savagely killed, and seemingly nothing can stop Miller and Worrell from killing again. 3 days after Connie Jordan's murder, James Miller and Christopher Worrell are back, searching for another victim. It's the early hours of Sunday morning, February the 12th.
Chris saw this girl walking along. So he got me to pull over and he offered her a lift and she got in.
Hey, would you like a lift?
No, I'm okay, thanks.
Come on, we're heading the same way. Just hop in, we'll give you a lift. It's quite late. Yeah?
Okay, yeah. Thanks.
This time, instead of going to Truro, Miller drives to a secluded beach at Port Gawler, north of the city. Deborah Lamb's murder is among the most violent of all. Worrell drags her from the car, forces himself onto her, ties her up, and stuffs a gag in her mouth. With her pantyhose wound tightly around her neck, she begins to choke. She's then dragged into a sandy culvert where Worrell piles dirt and sand over her body. It will later be revealed that Deborah was literally buried alive.
Oh, there's my dad there, so just hop in, yeah? Okay. All right, come on.
On the 23rd of December 1976, 18-year-old Veronica Knight is driven to the farmlands of Truro. After she's murdered, her body is dumped and hidden beneath twigs and branches.
Sister's got a place up there.
During the next several weeks, 6 more girls are raped by Christopher Worrell and James Miller, monsters who spend their nights trawling the streets for prey. Miller claims he's Worrell's innocent accomplice, who's been threatened with violence if he tries to stop the attacks. 4 of the victims have been murdered in as many days, and it now seems inevitable that more are about to die. But then, finally, fate intervenes. On a Saturday afternoon in February 1977, Worrell and Miller have another young woman in their car. Deborah Scouse is known to Worrell and accepts a lift with the pair. Suddenly, the vehicle spins out of control. Christopher Worrell and Deborah Scouse are killed. James Miller walks away with a broken shoulder. This time, Worrell was at the wheel. A few days later, at Worrell's funeral, Miller talks with one of Worrell's former girlfriends and mentions the murders. After Worrell's death, Miller suffers depression, becomes homeless, and makes no further mention of the killings. For months on end, parents live in hope that their daughters will call or find their way home. There are times when it seems their prayers are being answered, only to be cruelly dashed.
Again, I saw a couple of girls walking down the street, and one of them could have been Julie. I ran after them. I had, fortunately, enough presence of mind to keep running rather than stop and grab the girl, because I probably would have been arrested. But of course, it wasn't Julie.
About 14 months after Christopher Worrell is killed, Veronica Knight's body is found by William Thomas and his wife, who are looking for mushrooms in a paddock next to Swamp Road, north of Truro. At first, they think the bones are those of a dead animal, but Thomas's wife is troubled by the find and insists he go back for a second look.
When Mum had a very restless sleep, she couldn't sleep and she was getting premonition that someone was calling her back to go back there, which she ignored initially. The next night, the same thing happened. This feeling was so strong that they were compelled to go back, which was an hour's drive. So they went back there and they found the shoe and the bone again, and they looked carefully this time, and the whole foot was still in the shoe. And then they knew it was a human.
He also finds a skull and items of clothing. Police converge on the scene and summon detectives from Adelaide. The body is believed to be a teenage girl, but due to the state of the remains, police are unsure how she came to be there or how she died.
Her scattered remains were collected up and brought back to Adelaide from Swamp Road at Truro. Nature up there is very harsh, very hot, very dry. If she wandered off the road, she could have easily become disorientated and died of thirst.
Dental records confirm that the victim is Veronica Knight. The discovery of Veronica's remains in the remote field north of Truro in 1978 receives little publicity. However, Veronica's death is soon to become headline news as the case breaks wide open and the killing fields reveal their sinister secret. Over the preceding year, there's been a sudden drop in the number of young women and girls reported missing in Adelaide, but there's still nothing to connect the earlier disappearances. That's until Detective Ken Thorson receives a report from a fellow officer who thinks he might have found a connection.
And so I went through them all with him and came to the same conclusion that there was a strong possibility that there was a pattern of serious crimes.
Based on this information, police convinced the family of missing teenager Julie Makita to make a renewed appeal for information.
We were the only ones that were willing, so we went public. We went on television, radio, Women's Weekly, Women's Day, everything possible.
However, the police efforts go unrewarded and soon the investigation goes cold.
I'll leave you two guys to a day, Chris.
Where are you going?
Come on, it'll be fun.
What?
Almost a year later, bushwalkers stumble across the body of 16-year-old Sylvia Pitman. Her remains are discovered within a kilometre of where Veronica Knight's body was found.
The difference between Knight's body and Pitman's was that Knight's body was found within 100 metres of the swamp road, and Pitman's body was more than half a kilometre in from the road. It was obvious that someone must have driven in there to dispose of that body.
With two bodies found in roughly the same location, the alarm bells start ringing and the police reopen the files on the missing girls.
When the second one was found, it seemed logic that other bodies may well have been dumped in the Truro area. And we decided then that we would start a search of the area to see if any other bodies were up there.
A year later, in April 1979, a second body found in the same area.
Police converge on the sites, and it's not long before the investigators' worst fears are realised. On the opposite side of Swamp Road, a skull belonging to a third victim is found.
When it was first spotted, it was quite open to us. It's amazing how you can see, you talk about the forest and the trees, and I can remember the skull sitting up and looking and thinking, how didn't we see that first up?
When a fourth body is found nearby, police now know that they've stumbled on the work of a serial killer.
It looked like a serial killing at that stage, probably. You have to expect that a serial killer has habits that they tend to follow. They find an area where they think it's safe to dump the bodies, becomes almost ritualistic.
Within hours of the discovery of the third and fourth victims, the media descends on Truro.
What's the next step, Inspector?
The crime scene, people will go through and minutely examine both scenes. We're continuing with our broad line search to eliminate totally the areas that we intended to initially.
The two newly discovered bodies are in an advanced state of decomposition, so, again, police must rely on dental records to identify the victims. The remains are those of Connie Jordan and Vicky Howell. All of the victims have been found partially buried in the same area, and investigators now believe that Veronica is the first of the girls to have been murdered. Police have no doubt that a serial killer is responsible, but they have very few clues to work with. Weeks go by and the murder investigation stalls. Police are puzzled as to why the murders suddenly stopped.
It didn't take us long to realise that we had a start to it, which was basically a point in time, then there appeared to be an acceleration, then a stop. And of course the obvious conclusion is, why did it stop?
Among the thousands of leads police follow is a report about the death of former prison inmate Christopher Worrell. Worrell fits the profile of a violent sex offender and was killed in a car accident at about the same time that the killing stopped. Police appealed to the public for information, and then, just weeks into their investigation, a major breakthrough. A person calls detectives claiming to know the killer's identity.
Some member of the public had heard from someone else that someone had been raping girls and dumping them up near Blanchetown.
Police trace the information back and discover that the story came from James Miller, and he had told it to a former girlfriend of Christopher Worrell.
Given what she was able to tell us, it was obvious that the two persons we were looking at on the accident files, Christopher Worrell and James William Miller, were the two people we wanted.
Miller is located and arrested. At first, he denies any involvement in the murders, but then he begins to crack, and the horrifying details are finally revealed.
I didn't murder those girls in the paddock. I know who did. I only dragged him around with those girls. I had nothing to do.
Major Crime Squad detectives have arrested 38-year-old James William Miller, and they're questioning him about the murders of 7 young women. At first, he denies everything, but soon the trickle of information becomes a torrent.
Now, James, we have received some information that implicates you and at least one other person in the murder of at least 4 girls.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Do you remember any conversations that you had at Christopher Worrell's funeral?
No.
Miller declares Worrell is solely responsible for all the killings. Police now know of 4 bodies and all have been found at Truro, but the 3 others have yet to be discovered. Detective Glenn Laurie decides it's time for Miller to be charged.
So they took him down to the charge room, and I reckon within a few minutes Glenn came into my office and he said, "Guess what?" And my immediate reaction was, "Gee, don't tell me he's run away." But I said, "What's happened?" And he said, "We got him to the cell doors," and he said, "I'll show you where the other bodies are."
Detectives are elated. Despite Miller's admissions during his questioning, police have had no other evidence until now to link him with the murders. At 10:30 at night, James Miller is driven under police escort to Truro.
5 kilometres past Swamp Road on the left-hand side, down about 1.5 kilometres. He got us to turn into an old disused farmhouse.
So where is she? Over there.
For Miller to lead us to that in the middle of the night, he had to be reasonably familiar with that area.
There she is.
Detectives establish a crime scene while Miller is driven back towards the city. By now, the media realises that a major story is breaking.
It was becoming quite clear that the police knew something was more, that there was more activity up at Truro.
Next, James Miller takes detectives to the isolated beach at Port Gawler, where Deborah Lamb is buried.
It's an area with which a lot of people visit, but there's tracks leading in all over the place. It's like a network of little tracks running everywhere, and if I went there today, I would be totally lost again.
In the darkness, the exact location of Deborah Lamb's gravesite isn't easy to find. As police begin a detailed search, detectives drive James Miller to Wingfield, where he shows police where he and Worrell disposed of 15-year-old Tanya Kenny's body. Her skeleton is found at the Dean Rifle Range at the end of a dirt track leading to the target mound. Back at Port Gawler, Mick O'Reilly is with one of the searching police officers when he bends down to examine what looks like a burial plot.
And there was what appeared to be a little bit of fabric showing there, and he felt this fabric. And he just looked at me. We were probably about a foot apart. He looked at me and he mouthed the words, "Tibia, fibia, oh my God, is a body."
Most of Deborah's clothing is found intact with her remains. Underneath her skeleton, police find a small yellow plastic badge showing 2 children within a heart. After 2 hours of meticulous digging, police lift the skeleton from the grave almost intact. It's nearly dawn when James Miller is driven back to police headquarters and formally charged with the 7 murders. On March the 12th, 1980, Miller is found guilty on 6 counts, but not guilty of the murder of the first victim, Veronica Knight. For his part in each of the murders, he is given 6 life sentences. His parole date was set for 2014, but after serving 27 years in jail, he died of cancer in 2008.
I think the sentence that the judge gave was what he has to do in circumstances such as this. The only parts that concern me is parole periods. Well, it would appear at this stage that the state government here in South Australia are bringing in legislature that will enable them to keep people who they consider to be a danger to the community in prison indefinitely.
James Miller became the longest-serving prisoner in South Australia before he died in jail in 2008. But serious questions remain in spite of Miller's detailed confessions. All of his statements point squarely to Worrell as the sole culprit in the series of murders. Miller writes a book, Don't Call Me Killer, in which he brazenly brags of his fighting ability and claims he beat bigger bullies when he was in a reformatory.
You have to realise that someone who has such pride in his prowess as a fighter, he's not going to be controlled by some insignificant little wimpish person.
To many, it's inconceivable that Miller remained meekly mute when opportunities arose for him to report on Worrell's attacks before the death toll escalated. Both had been picked up, had their car searched and were questioned by police for suspected break-and-enters in the Woodville area early on in their murderous spree.
So if Miller had wanted to, he could have reported this to the police then, because at least one of the girls was already dead, if not 2.
Oh, he was there 100%. No way could one person hold her back. No way. I don't believe a word he says.
I don't think that 7 young women are so easily coerced into by a smooth-talking fellow with a fellow nearly twice his age.
The most important thing that people should understand, if they've got any doubts about what this enterprise was all about, they should go up to Truro. It's a long way to Truro. It's a long drive to nowhere.
When you got out of your car and went for your walks, you didn't hear a thing?
No. No, not a thing.